Staying with us, time now for African News with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, South Sudan's army claims to have gained the upper hand in the battle for the key oil town of Malakal, but insurgents say otherwise. Meanwhile, ceasefire talks failed to make much progress in Addis Ababa. Also, the EU votes to send hundreds of troops to Central African Republic to back up French and African forces already there trying to stem the violence. This is the country's new leader pledges consensus. And the opposition in Burkina Faso hails the weekend's anti-government protests as proof of its growing popularity. First up, Malakal is in our hands, says South Sudan's president. The army claims to have seized the capital of the Upper Nile region back from insurgents in fighting on Monday. However, rebels supporting ex-Vice President Riek Machar says otherwise, insisting that they are still in control. Malakal, like the city of Bor, has changed hands several times in a month of deadly clashes. Both have been devastated by fighting. Ethnic battle lines have pitted Machar's Nuer against President Salva Kiir's Dinka tribes. Kiir's criticised the UN's involvement in the crisis, accusing it of trying to run the country. Take a listen.
And if that is the position of Ban Ki-moon, he should make it clear that he wants the UN to take over South Sudan, so that nobody bothers around any other person. So the international community, yes, should be told really that they did not understand the situation. And if they were the ones who instigated Riek Machar to take this action, they really misadvised him.
Well, KIIR on Monday also said that he would pardon Machar if he surrendered. That is, though, an unlikely prospect. Ceasefire talks being held in Addis Ababa have made little progress, with the major sticking points being the question of Ugandan troops' backing of Juba and rebel demands that political detainees are released. Well, France 24's Madingo is in Juba. He tells us more about the role that the fighting's played in the standoff between the two sides as they discuss a ceasefire.
There has been little progress in the talks that have been going on for the last 2 weeks between the rebels and the government of South Sudan. And indeed, both sides wanted to see how they perform militarily. And it seems that in the last few days, the government is taking the upper hand. I just came back several hours ago after spending the night in the town of Bor, which has been a state that was solidly in the hands of the rebels for about 2 weeks. I spent the night there, and I can confirm that Bor is 100% under the government, and it's a big deal because Bor is only a few hours by road from the capital city, Juba. There was a lot of threat from the rebels that they would advance on Juba, the capital city. So that threat has been averted. Only today, several official sources from the government have indeed confirmed that Malakal, which is surrounded by so many oil fields, 80% of oil production has been retaken by government troops. So the government is now ready to sign a ceasefire. So indeed, both sides wanted to see how they perform militarily. The upper hand seems to be in the hands of the government, if the reports that Malakal falls under the government are indeed true.
Madingo there for us in Juba. Now, up to 600 European troops will be heading out to Central African Republic after the EU agreed to a rare joint military mission. It would be the bloc's first major ground operation in over half a decade. Now, the EU mission will back up French and African forces, helping secure the capital, Bangui. It's caught up in escalating clashes between Christian and Muslim militia that have multiplied as the country spiraled into chaos since a rebel takeover last year. Well, elected only today, the country's new leader, former Bangui mayor Catherine SAMBA PANZA, has called for an end to the violence.
There was joy and hope as the Transitional Assembly elected Catherine SAMBA PANZA as the new interim president. The Central African Republic's first female president signed up for a very demanding job, which includes, among other things, putting an end to months of sectarian violence.
As a mother, I want to pacify our people. When I listen to you, I feel hatred and bitterness in your hearts. Only a mother will be able to bring its sons and daughters together.
58-year-old Samba Panza is the mother of 3 and the mayor of the capital city, Bangui. She's perceived as a non-partisan politician. Her task at hand, convincing the Muslim and Christian communities that they can live side by side peacefully.
And that's the end. That's the entire population I've been waiting for. And this Joyce, and I do believe this Joyce will go beyond this center here to reach all the different sides.
The newly elected president called members of the Christian militia Anti-Balaka and the Seleka to put down their guns and stop the violence. Samba Panza is expected to name her cabinet in the coming days and start paving the way for free general elections in 2015.
Well, France 24's Ben Barnier sent us that report. We hear from him now from Bangui, where he remains, and he tells us more about what Samba Panza can bring to the table that her predecessor, Michel Dutodier, couldn't.
I think what Samba Panza can bring to the table, that's what we heard when we spoke to members of the Transitional Assembly, is a sense of consensus. As she said during her speech, she wants to be the mother of the nation, the mother who can bring the sons and daughters of the nation together. And you should have seen this sense of enthusiasm, of hope inside the Transitional Council. As soon as the result was announced, she stood up to the crowds and people were cheering and singing with her. Then as her convoy left the Transitional Assembly, there were people on the road that were just waving at her car. Again, a pretty rare sight in a place as desperate as the Central African Republic.
Now, is there much hope that the EU's pledge to send hundreds of soldiers to back up the French and African forces already in the country will actually make much of a difference? Or is the focus on really getting the country back on track more on the kind of political consensus that is hopefully going to be brought in by Samba Panza?
I think the answer, you really need both. On the one hand, you need strong institutions, leaders that people can trust and follow, no matter where they come from, whether they're Muslims or Christians. So definitely people are waiting for someone they want to follow, a leader. But the military front is just as essential. And as you know, the Sangaris mission is still patrolling in the capital and in the northern part of the country, as well as the troops in the African Union. Now this decision from the EU is perceived as a good sign, as a positive sign, but in terms of numbers, it's just 500 soldiers. It's not nearly as much as the Sangaris or the African Union forces.
Ben Barnier then Bangui for us. Now, tens of thousands of people gathered in several towns across Burkina Faso over the weekend in what the opposition's called historic demonstrations. Protesters are demanding a guarantee that President Blaise Compaoré will not try to change the constitution in order to run again in next year's election. Take a look.
Towns across Burkina Faso, protesters chanted this weekend, "Compaoré game over," and "Don't become like Gbagbo and Gaddafi, leave in peace." This Monday, the leader of the opposition, ZEPHIRIN DIABRE, told us he welcomed the rallies.
It was the biggest demonstration in the history of Burkina Faso. Secondly, there were no violent incidents. The protesters were angry but dignified. Thirdly, leaders of the president's party decided to leave him and join us.
Earlier this month, 3 of the president's closest allies joined the opposition. They are Roch Kaboré, Simon Compaoré and Salif Diallo. Blaise Compaoré has been in power since 1987, and many suspect he wants to change the constitution so he can be once again a candidate in next year's presidential election. His advisors don't deny this.
If people think that with the president we can move forwards, then why not change this article in the constitution? I think there should be a referendum, or the parliament should vote on this.
The opposition has vowed to return to the streets if Compaoré does indeed attempt what they call a constitutional coup and decides to run again for the presidency next year.
Well, that wraps up Africa news for me for today, but I will be back with more news from across the continent tomorrow. That ends it from me for today, though, and I'll head you back to Mark for more news and headlines from around the world.
Georgia Carvin-Smith, as ever, thank you very much indeed. Africa News, of course, back throughout live from Paris, throughout the evening schedule, and of course bringing us all the very latest from Africa. We're back with a news update and sport, of course, after the break. Stay with us.